Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Eric Mitchell, and welcome to the Talking Through It podcast. This is going to be a podcast kind of on teen mental health and specifically anxiety and depression. Um, Today, I brought with me my friend TJ. TJ, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm TJ McVeigh. I go to school with Eric, and I've agreed to help him with this podcast.
Yeah. So first, I just kind of like to start off by telling you what we're going to be talking about today. First, we're going to go through our personal experiences with this subject, uh, and then we're gonna shift into. I'm gonna tell some statistics to TJ, and I'm gonna hear his reactions to them because they can be quite shocking. Um, and then we're gonna talk about the importance of actually talking through it. You know, the namesake of this podcast. Um, then we're gonna go into how important it is to hear this kind of stuff from people our age, teens talking to teens and how that's important. And finally, we're going to talk about mental health during quarantine. So, first, let's just open up with our experiences. I'll go first. My name's Eric Mitchell. I go to a Jesuit high school in Detroit, and I have suffered from severe depression and anxiety since I was in fourth grade. Um, Being a senior now, that's quite a long time. So my depression and anxiety typically stems from, it runs in my family, but it really started with some bullying and abuse I received at school, which led me to really question my life and doubt myself, and it put me in a dark place. And that's kind of what depression and anxiety does. It makes you start to lose focus on life and what's important and if there's purpose. Um, and because of that, this topic has always been very important to me. So I was really happy when TJ accepted my call to do this podcast with me because I really want to talk about this subject because I feel like even though a lot of people talk about it, it can come across kind of as pandering or talking down to, and we'll get into that later. That's my experience with it. And TJ, if you want to share, what you've gone through.
Um, my mental health, I'm a lot like you, Eric. I struggled with a lot of depression, anxiety. Mine wasn't really at such a young age, though. It really kind of spiked in my junior year of high school. I used to be like a three-sport athlete. I had great grades, 3.5 GPA, and my whole year just got turned around, honestly. And it was really because of like a spike in anxiety and depression,
Mhm.
because I played football, and I was having a really bad season. And I was in a bad relationship at the time that it ended. And honestly, after all that shit, like, I was always like addicted to like nicotine, and I did drugs for the longest time, ever since like my sophomore year. And really, I had to go through a shift. I transferred to U of D like second semester of junior year. And that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do,
Mhm.
because it was just such a hard transition. I didn't know anybody. And that was really like what made my mental health hard, and what
Yeah.
really had a big impact on it.
Yeah. Like a sudden shift in your
Yeah.
world and everything around it that can really affect mental health.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was, I mean, I saw therapists, I did receive help, but I mean, it never really got, so to say, better. But I'm still coping with it.
Hmm.
And you know I'm not perfect.
No.
So yeah, that's really where I stand with it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. Thank you. Um, so that's kind of where we stand on it. Now let's talk about the world. Let's talk about specifically the U.S. And I'm just gonna tell you some statistics, and I want to hear your just gut reactions. I haven't shared these with you yet, but uh, here all these statistics are. I got them from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. So first off, 25.1% of children years 13 to 18 are diagnosed with anxiety disorders. What do you think?
Honestly, that's a little bit surprising, but also I can see why. I feel like our generation, there's a lot more pressure put on us,
Hmm.
especially in school, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah. But and modern struggles, social media and
Yeah,
self-image is a really big
I agree.
stressor in life, and you know living up to expectations, sibling or parent. And in the 21st century we set high expectations, so I understand that, but that still seems shocking. One in four.
Yeah, I'm really shocked by that, honestly, because like, no, not a lot of people shouldn't have to go through that.
Mhm.
25%, that's a little over the top.
Yeah. Okay, next point. a, Around 15.7 million adults age 18 or older, so not just teenagers, in the US experienced at least one major depressive episode in the last year, and this was in 2014. So that's 6.7% of adults in the US.
They face like a depression spike.
Yes, kind of massive depression spike or like depressive episode. So some kind of really big struggle in their life.
I mean, I can see why that number is where it is because, I mean, there's things like deaths in the family that can cause depression or, losing
Hmm.
a loved one, things like of that nature. But
Yeah,
also, it seems like just a little bit high to me, honestly, because
yeah. And the numbers only go up since then. This is just 2014, but
exactly
15.7 million adults. It seems
that's
like a lot.
yeah,
Now you often hear that depression and anxiety are linked. This is a fact. I know personally I was diagnosed with both depression and anxiety, and actually about 50%, about half of people diagnosed with depression are also diagnosed with an anxiety disorder.
hmm. Well, that's a little strange to me, honestly. Like, I feel like they're two completely different things when you
You
really look at it. Like, anxiety is more of a stressor, like it's more
Mhm.
panicky kind of feeling. But depression's really just like more self-pity, like you feel down a lot.
Yeah.
It's just surprising that those two are so mixed.
Yeah. And it, in my opinion, it kind of explains the crazy mood swings that you hear people who are diagnosed with both experience. Personally, I know that it's like a cycle where you start to get stressed out about things, and then that puts you into a spiral, and then the next thing you know, you're starting to lose focus on things, and then you're starting to lose the meaning of things, and you lose the meaning and the motivation to do things, and that's where the depression kicks in, which then you're depressed, so you're feeling bad, so then you start to get anxious again. And that that's why sometimes you have really high energy when you're stressed, and then low energy when you're depressed, and that's the disparity between the two.
Right.
um, so with that being said, talking through it, um, it's a phrase you hear a lot. It's something I wanted to talk about here. What does it even mean? In your experience, does talking through it help?
Um, in my own experience, talking through it can be helpful, but it really depends on who you're talking to. Because
Yes.
if it's like a trained professional, I think that's great, or a close friend, but sometimes there's just some people out there who you shouldn't go to with your problems, in my opinion.
Yeah, I respect that. Speaking personally, I used to be on medication, and I had a therapist. Unfortunately for because everyone's different. Everyone who suffers from depression and anxiety and any mental illness, they're different. For me, having a therapist um, wasn't great because it felt too clinical. Um,
Yeah.
the same with the medication. The medication just stressed me out more. So for me, talking through it has always been very important. But I more specifically turn to close friends that I trust, or family, or if you are religious, turning to prayer.
Yeah.
Um, but I believe, and I'd like to stress to the audience that talking through it is very important. Whether it's silent meditation on it, whether it's talking to a trained professional, talking to a loved one or someone that you trust, talking is important. I feel that even if you know that the person you're talking to can't fix the problem,
Right.
helping to get the problem out, it gets a weight off your chest,
Yeah.
right? hmm Um, Now, what about the common issue that I see, at least in my experience, not just at U of D, but in the world in general, whenever I hear people talk about mental health and, depression and anxiety and mental illnesses, it often is someone older than me, like a teacher,
Right.
a counselor, or some doctor researcher. And and they're not intentionally doing it, but it can feel like they're talking down or
Uh,
they're separated from the issue. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah. So, in your experience, whether it's through you talking to other people or other people having talked to you about their issues, how important is it to talk to someone of the same age?
Well, I feel like it's important because like they see it at your level. I
hmm
feel like an adult, they experienced it, but they're not currently going through it. They
hmm
don't know exactly what you're feeling because there are people out there that are going through exactly what you are. And it's really nice to just kind of get together and talk to people like yourself.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah. And you often hear like your parents went through the same thing, or adults like to
Yeah.
say, I went through the same thing when I was younger. The thing is, I feel like the times have changed so much.
Yeah.
Depression and anxiety, mental health, it's been an issue for decades. But in that time, it's not like it's been the same issue. It's evolved, and it's grown along with us. So, like modern issues, like teenage use of social media and technology, um, and interactivity between people and different social standards of the times, it's all shifted um, in the past decades. So even though our parents or adults may have gone through similar things, I don't think they went through the same things.
Right.
Yeah. um, so I understand that connection of wanting to talk to someone who is the same age as you, someone who understands.
Right.
um, and even then, do do you feel like you can be more open with someone who's of the same age as you?
Well, I feel like it's more of a feeling of being comfortable, because
hmm
like talking to your parents, you're not always comfortable revealing all this private information that they're not going to like. But talking to someone who won't not judge, but more like understand what you've done
Yeah.
is,
Um,
is a way to put it.
like in my experience at U of D, I do trust my counselor. I do trust the person, but that doesn't necessarily mean because I trust them that I want to go to
Want to
them.
open up. Right.
Yes, I'm far more comfortable opening up to one of my classmates,
Yeah.
or one of my family members. And even with family members, sometimes it can feel strange to open up to someone you're too close to at the
Yeah.
same time. Um, so I feel like within people our age, within your friend groups, you have people who know you well enough that you can go to them, but also people who maybe don't well you know you as well, but you feel still more comfortable going to them.
Right.
Um, and even when I get into like my quote, dad mode, or like my, because like I like to give, I like to hear people's problems. That I I think it's important though that no one our age is like an expert. So if it's a problem and you feel like someone is, planning on hurting themselves or hurting others, or you feel like this is for if you get talked to, try to seek external help, because
Right.
while talking to people our age can feel more comfortable, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct move.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
understand that because there's some like limitations to what you can tell someone because if you are like hurting yourself, like you mentioned before, like that's when you need to that's when you need to seek out real help.
Yeah.
Opinion.
Um, but at the same time, sometimes it's not as serious. Sometimes it is just
Right.
you
Yeah.
had a bad day, and
Yeah.
there's
Exactly.
there's something to be said about going out to picking up your one of your best friends, going out to eat, and just talking through the day.
Yeah.
Um, there's nothing quite like that. So friendship, having people the same age you can talk to and trust, very important. Um, Finally, let's talk about what's going on in the world right now. For the past few months, we've kind of been you know held up in our own homes, unable to leave. How do you feel that's affected mental health?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of stress, but I
Hmm.
feel like there's also not as much because
Okay.
really I feel like the schoolwork, this is just at U of D. I don't know other schools, but I feel like online isn't as challenging in a way, but I can see why some people would struggle, but like it's also just hard to not see your friends and be in a social environment,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. For me, so suffering from depression and anxiety, one of the things that I've always struggled with is self motivation.
Right.
So specifically about online school, transitioning to that, it's a lot harder for me to motivate myself to get up in the morning or really do my work if I'm not physically going somewhere, if I'm not
Yeah.
seeing my friends. Um, Getting away from school, though, I feel like there's a general anxiety in the world because no one's quite sure about what's going
Oh,
on.
yes, I completely agree with that. I feel like there's too much speculation
Hmm.
because everybody's thinking like they're not going to have this summer, there's not going to be anything to do. They're just going to be stuck in their homes for they don't know how long, and that's really what's causing this spike of anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. And I know personally, this may come off a bit rude, I mean spirited, but for me, I, there's something to be said about getting out your anxieties, your worries, or your grief about, because we're seniors, we're missing out on stuff. But rampant speculation, I don't feel helps anyone.
Yeah,
Spreading misinformation or not necessarily completely accurate information,
right.
um, that doesn't help anyone. It only serves to worsen the situation. Um, and something that's affected me during this quarantine is the lack of actual nature and going outside. Um,
Yeah, today was actually the first day I actually went out and I did something because I went to a basketball court. My mom finally like gave me some freedom.
mhm.
It was just I haven't felt that happy in a while, honestly. Like I've been cooped up inside. I go to work and that's it. And
Yeah, yeah. For me, I um, I just went on a drive. I went on a little drive, and that there's something to be said about the sunshine. Just seeing the day, and then even I was excited. Uh, my father told me I had to weed and pull some vines and prepare the grass around our house, and I was happy to do it because it just meant I was
yeah,
outside. Yeah. Um, so I feel like what people miss the most is face-to-face human interaction.
Yeah, just being able to just have some fresh air for once, because like
Yes.
you're stuck in the house all day. But when you just step outside, even if you can just step outside, like in your backyard, just for like 5 minutes, you feel so much better, honestly,
Hmm.
because you just feel more free in a way.
Yeah. My family's played a bit of cornhole, you know. Nice, nice Midwestern game for you. um, so with all that being said, do you have anything else you want to say? Yeah.
One thing I want to say is just don't be afraid to talk to anyone. All these people out here, you can't run or hide from your problems forever. No matter what it is, whether it's just mental health or anything else you're struggling with, you can't run from it. You have to face it eventually. And the way you face it just really depends on, who you are and how you want to face that problem, whether it's by talking to someone, which we highly recommended throughout this podcast, or just doing something on your own, to help you cope with it. But that's
Mhm.
really all I got to say.
Yeah, that's great. For me, I echo that. That's all good. The importance of talking to someone. Um, I'd also like to say, staying, being aware, um, of the symptoms, because this the purpose of this podcast was kind of to prove that teens can talk about these things. We can
Right.
have intellectual conversation, talking through it, very important, but also not just talking through it, but being there for someone else who's talking about it, you know, or noticing the symptoms of, depression, anxiety, mental illness. If you'd
Right.
like to know any of the symptoms, I'm sure many people in the audience have heard them from counselor meetings. You can find them all online very easily. But looking out for your friends, looking out for yourself, staying safe, all of that, very important. One last thing I'd like to throw into the end here is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, just in case, is 1-800-273-8255. Um, and just never be afraid to reach out if you're hurting, if you feel like someone else is hurting. With all that being said, I'd really like to thank TJ for joining me on this talk. And
My
I'd like, yeah, thank you. And I'd like to say thank you, stay safe, and remember to talk through it.